Welcome to the program. This, as always, is Truth in a Nutshell, and I am glad you could join us. Today, I want to talk about an aspect of our faith, an aspect of our Christian walk that has, in large part, been left somewhere on the outskirts of Christian teaching. Perhaps this aspect is not totally forgotten by the modern-day churches, but it is rarely used, infrequently so, and when it is used for the wrong reasons, with the wrong heart, for the entirely wrong motives and motivations. I speak, of course, of prayer. And those of you who already knew the topic I was going to discuss today, just by the introduction, bravo, you get a gold star. To me, at least, the most lasting reminder of how important prayer is for all of us, whether we're evangelists, preachers, or laymen, is the fact that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, prayed. And he prayed often. Today I want to discuss one particular prayer, a prayer that stands out and should be studied and analyzed for its profundity, namely the prayer that Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Before we get into the words of the prayer, we must keep in mind the setting and the emotional connotation of the prayer, which are equally important. Luke chapter 22, verse 41 tells us that he, meaning Jesus, was withdrawn from them, meaning his disciples, about a stone's throw. And he knelt down and he prayed. The first thing that should strike us concerning this verse is the prayer Jesus prayed in the garden, and the fact that it was an intimate prayer. He did not pray it publicly. He didn't even pray it while his disciples were around. He withdrew from them about a stone's throw. Then he knelt down and he prayed. It is far easier to pour out your heart when it is just you and God than when you have an audience. Although the Gospel of Luke does not capture the scene quite as vividly, the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 26, beginning with verse 39, tells us that this was a prayer from deep within the heart of Christ. A prayer of humility, because it is written that he not only went a little further away from them, but that he fell on his face and he began to pray. This was a prayer of brokenness, the prayer of a humble heart. Among other things that are already visible in this beautiful prayer is the fact that this is the prayer of a son to his father. When we pray, we must know first and foremost who we are in reference to God and what he is to us. If we know that we are his children and that he is our Father, then we will pray with faith and with certainty. If, however, we know that we're illegitimate, that we're merely crying out, hoping someone will hear us, like a drowning man in the middle of a sea, who's willing to reach out to anyone that's willing to pluck him out of the depths, then we never really pray with faith. It is merely with a fleeting hope. Jesus prayed as a son praying to his Father. In Mark chapter 14, verse 36, we read, "And he," meaning Jesus, "said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will." Now, I've heard it said by men who should be beaten about the head and shoulders with bamboo rods for their heresy, if not much worse, that we're never supposed to pray God's will be done. That in fact we're supposed to demand. We're supposed to pound our fist upon the proverbial table and demand everything that we're entitled to. And of course, what we're entitled to is always material in nature, because heaven forbid that God's children seek after godly things. But that's another teaching for another time. Now, Jesus, the Son of God, prayed to his Father knowing that he was to endure those things which he endured. He prayed knowing that he would go through the most painful thing any human had gone through. And he said, "Father, I know all things are possible for you. If it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will." Now let's analyze these words just for a second. Jesus prefaced his prayer by saying he already knew that nothing was impossible to the Father. He never phrased his prayer, if you can make it happen, if you can do it, if it's possible in any way. He began his petition by saying, I know nothing is impossible for you. Take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Today's modern preachers would have you believe that there is no place for that last phrase in the Christian vocabulary. Demand it, brother. Yes, demand it. Don't say, not what I will, but what you will. No, that's not for you. Just demand. Take this cup away. Period. End of prayer. No brokenness, no humility, just that bloated, odoriferous sense of entitlement that so many foolish Christians have today. Yes, do this for me, God. No, please. No, thank you. You owe me. Jesus, the Son of God, in his most passionate prayer said, if it were up to me, I would have this cup pass from me, taken away, never to be revisited. However, lest I seem to demand it of you, my Father, not my will, but your will be done. I urge anyone who believes that they're entitled to demand anything of God to revisit this prayer in the Bible and pray for a little understanding before we start acting like spoiled, ignorant, and foolish and disobedient children. Yeah, but when I pray, Mr. Preacher Man, I pray for stuff that's important to me. Don't you believe that not getting nailed to a cross wasn't important to Christ? Don't you believe he was passionate or at least felt strongly about it? The Bible tells us in Matthew that he prayed thusly 3 times. It was an insistent prayer, praying the same words, hoping he would not have to endure what he was about to endure. If you don't believe me, go and read Matthew chapter 26, verse 44 for yourself. Even though he did not want to drink the bitter cup, even though he was insistent in his prayer to the Father, Jesus never cried out, I demand it, let my will override yours. Do as I demand because, well, it's important to me. All right, since we're quickly running out of time, I'd like to point out one more thing concerning the prayer of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane that some people really might not have realized. This prayer was, in fact, an answered prayer. Yes, the prayer Jesus prayed 3 times in the garden was answered. Perhaps not in the way he had hoped or the way he had prayed, for the cup was not spared him and he drank it to the last drop. But his prayer was indeed answered in the form of an angel. Luke chapter 22, verse 43 and 44 says, Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. An answered prayer isn't always being spared from trials or tribulations, but merely being strengthened that we might endure the trial or the tribulation. An angel appeared to Jesus from heaven that he might endure that which he had to endure, that we might be saved and restored and reconciled unto God. The next time you think of putting a prayer, dear friend, the next time you find an excuse for not bending your knee and petitioning the Father, the next time you try to find an excuse for not having fellowship with him, just remember, Jesus prayed. And the prayer in the garden was not his only prayer. Yes, Jesus prayed often, for in prayer he found his strength, always remembering to put the Father's will before his own, leaving an immutable example for us to follow all the days of our lives. May we be wise and learn true prayer, that the storehouse of all of heaven's treasures may be opened for us. I realize we've only just scratched the surface of prayer, but Lord willing, there will be more programs on this topic. For now, I leave you with the peace of the Lord, and thank you for joining us today.